Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Since last year, when a consent judgment was given in favor of the Nigerian government by the Supreme Court over the right to increase its revenue share of the production sharing contracts with international oil companies, there has been a growing agitation for the oil majors to pay hefty sums in compensation for exploiting the terms of those contracts for so long at the expense of the country. This argument is predicated on the terms which allow Nigeria to increase her revenue share each time oil sells for more than $20 a barrel at the point of review. Since 2004, Nigeria's crude has consistently sold above that benchmark, hitting an all-time high in 2008 when the country's Bonny Light crude went for as much as $147 in the global market. Curiously, between 2004 and 2019, there has been no effort to effect a review from the Nigerian point of view, resulting in loss of billions of dollars worth of revenue. In that respect, Nigeria is now demanding up to $62 billion from the oil majors, while the labor movements and even stakeholders like human rights lawyer Femi Falana are pitching for nothing less than $100 billion in compensations. But who is right and who is wrong? For more on this, we're now being joined by Dr. Diran Fawibe, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of International Energy Services Limited. Dr. Fawibe is a seasoned oil and gas professional and pioneer staff of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. Welcome to the program, sir. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Welcome to the morning show. And thank you for obliging us all the time.
No, it's okay.
But, I mean, you had Tundun's introduction, the production sharing contracts. What happened? Section 5 of the agreement is very clear. Section 16 is very clear. And somehow we just didn't do anything over the years, giving an advantage to the international oil companies. So is it a case of negligence on the part of the Nigerian government, or some people just forgot, to do what was right?
Well, we should ask the government what has gone wrong. Yes, you have the law. You have provisions in the production sharing contract. But who is supposed to bring up the issue of review of the revenue coming from there? If you sign a contract and we stipulate that, periodically you will have to review, the terms of the contract, including revenue sharing, and you don't come up with that review, you are the one who has something to lose. The oil companies don't have much to lose. Yes, the arrangement was that the oil companies will finance the operations, and they will recover their cost, and they will share the profit, in the ratio of 80-20 for the deep water assets. Even though many people felt that, the sharing was skewed to the side of the oil companies in the first instance. But given that you have agreed to that, because at the time the production sharing contracts were being negotiated, many people didn't actually understand the nature of deep water development, because it was pretty risky. And so it's right for the company to say, okay, I'm going to recover my cost and then share profit with government on a very lesser scale. Some people are feeling that, why was it that, after the companies have recovered their costs, why shouldn't they share at a ratio higher than 20% to government? But that's a totally different question. But now you have opportunity to recover, your revenue, and then you went to bed. Now, many years later, you now wake up to say you want to recover the revenue that was supposedly lost in the process of not taking up the issue of review of the contract, whereby you can now say that, okay, the price of oil was more than $20 per barrel. So, gentlemen, let's sit down and then talk about, the revenue. So, to my own mind, I'm not a lawyer, and I don't really know what the law says in respect of retroactivity. But we often say that, how should a law be made to, application of law should be made to be retroactive? And that is the question. But in this particular instance, I wouldn't blame the oil companies per se. Yes, they could easily say that, we'll enter into this agreement. And also when the payment of any revenue above $20 per barrel was not through the process of saying, okay, you have to open an escrow account, and then you pay the money there, and then at a later date, you now decide to know how it was being shared. So the process of profit sharing did not stipulate that the oil companies will have to bring up the issues. Yes, they could, but if they refuse to bring, if they did not, so who is to be blamed? So I would think in this particular case, probably Nigerian state. I love my country. I want Nigeria to have more revenue, but you can't wake up one morning because you need money to finance so many things, and then you say that, oh, the company should come and pay what they supposedly should have paid, but the government ought to have brought up these issues. And I've advanced this cause many times. We are not doing well in terms of the structure we put in place to monitor, government interests in the oil company, just as in so many other areas. For example, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Petroleum, the NNPC, and some Federal Board of Inland Revenue. These are government agencies that should be very much up and doing when it comes to monitoring, revenue that should accrue to government, especially for the oil companies. The oil companies, they are here to make money. And if they have taken the trouble of going into financing deep water assets, then the people who, the passive equity holder, which is government, ought to say that, okay, I have interest here, so how am I going to drive the arrangement so that I'm not shortchanged?
Absolutely, sir. So we're looking at factors such as incompetence, some kind of indolence, then there's also corruption, because this is not the first attempt to review this agreement, and there's certain people positing that some, bribes were exchanged to keep people silent on this score. What are your thoughts on that? And also another factor, which could be fear of losing our investors. Dr. Abati referred to the news reported this morning that Chevron is divesting following the lead of Royal Dutch Shell and ExxonMobil. They have their shale in New Mexico and Texas, so they're thinking we need to reduce our footprint in Nigeria. Could that have attributed to some of this negligence? And also, sir, what is the exact figure that we have lost? Because the government puts the figure at $62 billion. Others, like Femi Falana, put it at $100 billion.
Well, you see, frankly, I have not done any calculation, any computation as to know which figure we should be talking about. But let's look at the principle. The principle, and it's not difficult to actually assess. Okay, the price of oil has gone from $20 to a high level of up to $147 per barrel at certain periods, or above $100. So we could take it per period of time to say what was the price of oil this particular month, or this particular quarter, or this particular year. Or if you are taking an average figure, okay, what is the price of oil during that particular period? How much was calculated to be government share by the oil companies, at a particular time, and then you come up with the difference. So, but the issue is this. Anybody can come up with figures, but we should look at the fundamentals that should we actually come up at this time or wake up one morning and say that, oh, you oil companies, you are not, you are owing me so much. I don't really know what I can call it. I wouldn't put it as corruption that, some people colluded with the oil companies to keep silence just because they don't want the issue of revenue accrued to government to be brought up. Should I say that it's a question of incompetence? But when you look at our national life, there are so many areas of our national life that we tend to be, would I say that Nigerians are not patriotic? They are not looking for the interests of the country. Enough. And we saw the case of 9.6 billion, which P&ID company was talking about. If you go to so many areas of our national life, various ministries and so on, this type of situation, we always find it in our closet. Okay, was it a question of corruption? I don't know. Is it a question of collusion? I don't know. But the fact remains, if we then dig down to say what has been responsible for this, then you can start to discover the motive, for these things happening. But it's happening day in, day out. And it's a terrible situation in our country. Now, you are right to say that, the companies, may feel disenchanted. Now, we know too well some of the companies, international majors, are investing in other countries, big money in other countries. And here in Nigeria, they are divesting. Right now, I would say that in spite of all the divestment that Shell did, some couple of years ago, they are still putting down some investment in Nigeria. They are developing some, or hoping to develop some assets in the deep water. But we should recognize that the companies have had a lot of hassle in Nigerian environment. If you just remember some of the challenges they have been facing in the oil-producing communities, yes, I wouldn't say that, it's they don't have some share of blame in this particular area in terms of how they have driven their operations over time, causing, the problem is, with the communities. But you can also appreciate the fact that there are some of the money, revenue generated, which ought to have been used to develop the oil-producing communities, either by way of tax or royalty and so on. What did you do with the money? We are putting responsibility on the companies. They ought to do this, they ought to do that, forgetting that in the first instance, the companies are here to exploit oil, make profit, share the revenue with government, and then if they have been sharing revenue with government over time, what are we doing with our own share of the revenue?
Absolutely, Doctor. And it gets more interesting because what you're basically saying here is that when it comes to the money that we've lost so far, we can't now turn around and go and put the full blame on the IOCs when we haven't had our own house in order.
Yes.
And one big topic that has come up in support of this as well is, of course, the usual topic of the fuel subsidy. And it's just been reported that the NNPC's fuel subsidy increased by 58.6 billion naira in 1 month alone. And people are looking at the amount that is spent on fuel subsidies and saying, hey, but we're losing so much money here in our oil sector to the same subsidy that is consistently argued against. What is your take on the amount of money that is being spent on fuel subsidy in the country at the moment? And do you think that it's very difficult for us to talk about generating money through PSCs and reclaiming our money when we've spent so many years in following a system that is not working for us?
Well, let me ask you, should we have been spending so much money on fuel subsidy?
No.
What is the genesis of fuel subsidy? We have 4 refineries with a nameplate refining capacity of about 445,000 barrels per day. Given the fact that we cannot operate at 100% capacity, assuming we are operating, instead of 445,000 barrels per day, we are operating at 400,000 barrels per day. The amount of imported fuel we are having in this country generating or leading to this substantial or high level of subsidy. If we are refining about 400,000 barrels per day of oil in this country, yes, the level of domestic consumption is more than 400,000 barrels per day. Then the volume of imported oil should have been very much less, and consequently, the amount we are paying for subsidy will have been considerably less. Why has our refineries not been working for many years? Administration came and gone and so on. So why have we not been able to fix the refineries over time? So that is the issue. Is there any jinx that we have not been able to break in this process?
Well, Dr. Fawibe, on that note about jinx, we'll take a commercial break, and then when we return, we can explore that further.
Okay.
We'll be right back. It's still the morning show. You're still watching the morning show here on the Arise News channel. And still with us in our Lagos studio is Dr. Diran Fawibe, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of International Energy Services Limited, who has been helping us to review the whole controversy and developments around the amendment of the production sharing contract bill. Now, Dr. Fawibe, before we went on break, you were talking about refineries and subsidy and all that. But let me take you back to the bill, which was, amended, passed, and that amendment was passed by the House of Representatives yesterday. Previously, the Senate had also amended the production sharing contract bill. Now, what's the significance of this amendment? Does it strengthen the position of the Nigerian government, considering the fact that the IOCs, particularly Shell, they've gone to court to say that they are not bound by the earlier Supreme Court ruling, which paved the way for the amendment of the PSC, and they've insisted that they have no fault in the matter, and that in any case they cannot be asked to pay arrears, because the Supreme Court judgment, they were not parties to it. So clearly the IOCs don't want to pay any arrears. So how do you think this can be resolved? And what is the significance of the bill?
Well, first of all, the significance of the bill. The National Assembly did a good job in terms of expeditiously, passing the bill into law. But I think this was coming in the wake of some of the issues we'll be having, particularly with respect to the oil and gas industry. Take the case of the PNID, case of $9.6 billion. So I think, and this administration, the next Senate, putting aside the legislature's radical behavior of the previous ones, they want to be seen to be forthcoming in terms of cooperation with the executive. So one should be able to commend them, for passing the bill very quickly. Of course, it has a potential, to help the government to recover, revenue, going forward. I don't really know about, the arrears, because as you rightly mentioned, the oil companies were not party to the case of the state, taking federal government to court, which ultimately led to the Supreme Court judgment in terms of the state being able to recover, their own share of adjustment in the share of the state. Well, that was the whole essence of this. And incidentally, the protagonist in the case that led to that Supreme Court ruling was the current Minister of State for Petroleum, Chief Silver. And he was reported to have said recently that, forget about the areas we are talking about. It's a lost opportunity for the country. Let us concentrate on the future. Now, to my own mind, if government is going to get anything back from the companies, maybe through the process of negotiation. But I'm not too sure whether you can actually hold the companies. Now, let me take you back to an issue. In the PIB, which we have been dramatizing for upward of about 10 years, with not passing into law, when other countries were spending just about 18 months, like Ghana, for example, Kenya, some of these countries were spending a year or thereabout to pass their own oil bill into law. We are spending about 10 years. What are the factors responsible? Now, some of the problems we are having today probably would have been corrected if the bill had been passed into law many years ago, because it was supposed to have enthroned some level of transparency and accountability in the way we manage oil and gas resources. But up to today, we are still playing politics. So that is part of the problem. So now, you signed a production sharing contract with the oil companies in 1993. The contract provided for review. If, for example, if the wisdom of 1993 was what made you to agree on those terms, say 5 years later, you now review it, the companies will sit down with you and negotiate. One thing I know, I've had the privilege of relating to the, especially at highest level of the companies, of administration. And I know if you do your homework properly, the oil companies will respect your position. They will even respect you as individuals. So if we have put our house in order, and we come up with, my boss used to tell me those days, thanks to Chief Philip Asiodu and Chief Mario and the late SB Awoniyi, They will say that, do your homework thoroughly. You can't go to government and say that on the basis that I'm government, you want to twist. You have to work and do your homework before confronting the companies. If you do that, the companies will be forthcoming and they will negotiate with you on clean and clear terms.
Yes, sir.
And then you'll be able to advance your interests of your nation. I'm not saying that people who are in government today, they are not patriotic as such, but something has been fundamentally gone wrong in the way we manage our affairs, in the way we run things with the companies. And the companies, okay, let's put it this way. When you are doing a project, in deep water or any project for that matter, you run the economics of that project. At the end of the day, you establish your cost and what is your margin, what is your profit. The oil companies who have shared, put their margins in the profit which they declare to their dividends, and they pay dividends to their shareholders. You now want to come 6-7 years later to say that, oh, that money at that time you made, you should come and give me my own share. What were you doing at that time?
When you put it like that, sir, equity does not aid the indolent. But I wanted to ask you, sir, the Attorney General Abubakar Malami says that they're negotiating, even though the government's recovery agent, the Trobel International, is not seeming wildly optimistic. But it says they're negotiating, all options are on the table. What are those options is my first question. Secondly, MTN also comes to mind in a different sector, the telecoms communication sector. The government slapped them with a fine of over $5 billion, $5.2 billion. They were able to negotiate and they paid $1 billion. Is there a chance that Nigeria could at least get a slice of whether it's 62 billion or 100 billion at any point in time?
No, well, I guess you are talking about a tale of two cities. MTN issue is one thing. This oil company's issue is a totally different thing. I'm not saying, the case of MTN, it was a fine. They actually breached the regulations, saying that all as SIMs must be registered. And come to think of the damage it caused to the security of the country, whereby they were not following the regulations or whether it was law. So that one is a different thing. But this particular issue of the oil companies, yes, the oil companies are under should be ready to engage government in review of the production sharing contract. I will say this, like I said before, I would be interested if Nigeria is having $200 billion today to meet a variety of issues, myriads of problems confronting us. But if we had failed, and I think I align myself with the position of the Minister of State for Petroleum, that
just move on.
Yes, that you have to move on. But yes, if you can appeal to the companies in their good conscience, and then they are forthcoming and say, okay, we recognize that you ought to have paid more than what we paid, even though strictly based on the rules, we have not breached anything. Maybe they could pay some money to government. But if they continue to fight to Supreme Court, it is really like a case of Justice Ayo Rikefe when we are doing 2.8 billion money oil missing. He chided government at that time that, oh, you are looking sideways when they were taking your oil away from the country. And so this is a perennial situation in the country whereby we don't pay due attention at the right time. Well, I'm not very optimistic, and that is the situation, unless the Ministry of Justice will now take the oil companies to court. Because I'm not too sure, even though I'm not a lawyer, I don't know the extent to which you can use the judgment of the case between the federal government and the state as a platform for recovering what you are supposed to have gotten from the companies over time. And the companies, you see the argument they put up, we are not party to that case. So to that extent, we are not liable. And to some extent, you don't even need to be a lawyer. If you are an oil administrator, you know that to a reasonable extent, the companies might be right. But like I said, maybe on the basis of good conscience of the companies. But the issue now is that even when you look at the position of the oil companies in the country, I'm not too sure. This is the situation we were having with the company in the 60s and 70s and even 80s. Now, when you have a partner, and I've canvassed this issue several times, when you have partner in business, you don't go on the open, on the rooftop to say that you are a thief. How do you expect? Let's look at it in terms of ourselves as individuals. But if you are bound to have disagreement at one time or the other, but you have to find a way to discuss and negotiate, not when the back of the oil companies are put to the wall, as it were, making for them to say we want to leave the country. Yes, they will come up with to say, oh, we are not leaving, we are just rearranging our portfolio and so on. The bottom line is that they were putting money in some other jurisdictions. They were investing in some other substantial money. In our own country, go to some of the things we are doing now. Presently, I can tell you that what some of the companies are doing is managing their existing assets to produce oil, not in terms of reinvestment. But you can say that a few of them are still doing some, but the simple truth is that we should be able to meet with the companies on a good platform. And I said this to some people that, you know, maybe, because looking at the way the oil companies were engaged in the 60s, in the 70s, and in the 80s, they were brought together as partners. The present leadership of NNPC, and I give kudos to
Doctor, sorry, we do have to take another short commercial break, but
okay.
As soon as we're back, of course, the conversation continues. Do stay with us. There's still more. Welcome back. You're still watching The Morning Show here on Arise News, and we still have Dr. Diran Fawibe in the studio with us, the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of International Energy Services Limited. Thank you for staying on the program. Now, I was looking up in the newspapers that the MD of the NNPC, Melekiari, had said that in this situation, what he's interested in overall is equity and fairness. So I want to ask you, Doctor, what exactly would an equitable and fair outcome be in this particular situation, if we were to draw the line and say, you know what, this is honestly just where we call a spade, and this is how things should be?
Well, it's good enough for him to say that. And like I was saying before, with the few months he has spent as the GMD of NNPC and the type of engagement he's having with the companies, I think it shows that, you know, he is ready to deal with the oil companies. And I will see it will be a departure from the past, you know, because like I was saying, I knew, I've been in this industry for 50 years, and I know the way the oil companies were engaged, when they were making all these investments, you know, in the country. Yes, granted, there are some countries who have not who are not oil-endowed countries at that time. So the oil companies were making investments, but I knew the way they were engaged as partners. Now we move from concession to production sharing contract. I could tell you that today we are far, there is some distance between us and the companies. Yes, we are not saying that the oil companies should be on the corridor of Hassel Rock every day. But there has to be some elements of discussion, conversations going on behind what we could even see, you know, behind the scenes to ensure that they put in more investment. Yes, the independents, like the Seplat of this world, like Oando of this world, they are doing very well. And they give us hope for the future that indigenous companies, Nigerian companies, will do well in the upstream sector of the economy. But we still need the IOCs because they have the technological base for the oil and gas industry. They have a network all over the world. New things, new technologies are being developed. And they have deep pockets in many respects to be able to go into some risky terrains to work with us. So we still need them. We should not alienate them. I'm not saying we should pamper them. Of course, what belongs to Nigerian state must be given to Nigerian state. What belongs to Caesar must be given to Caesar. So we should not allow them to shortchange us. We should put enough resources in monitoring the companies, either at the level of NNPC or at the level of Ministry of Finance or Board of Inland Revenue. We can't be waking up and be ridiculing ourselves, in the world to say, look at these people, what were they doing at this particular time, that they were not watching over their interests. Well, so that is the fundamental thing.
Doctor, there was an issue that came up earlier. I mean, we made a point about maybe what we're dealing with is incompetence or maybe negligence, Nigeria slipping on its rights. But the 8th Assembly also tried to amend the production sharing contracts, bill, or act rather. Now, it didn't happen. They tried to work on it, they left it.
Why?
Is it possible? And then it had to take some governors going to the Supreme Court in 2018, AG Rivers versus AG Federation, for us to get to this point. Is it possible that Nigeria dropped the ball because there had been some collusion between the IOCs and certain officials, maybe Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Petroleum Resources, or some departments in NNPC? Because you've said twice now that you know how the IOCs operate. If the IOCs didn't want to pay, extra royalties, could they have, colluded or influenced certain officials who then sabotage Nigeria's interests for their own personal gain? And I ask that question because is this an issue, because it's about economic interest, that maybe a body like the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission should investigate just to look at the books to see whether somebody buried a memo that should have activated, Section 16 of the relevant act?
Ruben,
will you go that far?
No, Ruben, I'm not competent. I would say I'm not competent to infer on the motive that occasioned these issues. And of course, we have law enforcement agencies to go deep into it. Like, for example, take the case of PID. Eventually, they were able to trace the fact, the legal advisor in the Federal Ministry of Petroleum, was compromised his position in terms of engaging the PNID. Whether that was even enough, because if it was just about chicken change for which he compromised the interests of the country, but is there no other interest far bigger than that of the legal advisor that compromised that? But in this particular case, whether it was an act of corruption or compromise, I wouldn't know. And I deal with facts as I see it. So, but the fact remains that we didn't do well. Let me put it that way. We did not do well as a nation. We have so many agencies of government that ought to have been more proactive. Yes, the 8th National Assembly you refer to tried to amend the production sharing law, but I would say that why did it not happen? And the previous government, the previous National Assembly tried to approve the PIB. Why did it not happen? So many years ago, yours sincerely, on 2 occasions, at different, both in the Senate and in the House of Rep Committee in upstream, went to make a presentation. There are so many people who made spirited effort to ensure PIB was passed in the past. Up till now, we still haven't been able to pass it. So these are the issues that we should not take one case in isolation. We should look at things generally, what is happening, and it's a wake-up call for all of us. And I know the media are doing very well, in terms of sensitizing the public. But this is not a question of emotion. Like once civil society organization said, oh, Shivas, the Minister of State for Petroleum should be sacked for raising the issue that, let's move on, let's forget about that. Are you now saying that the minister was compromising his position, wanting to collude with the oil companies? But like I said, if through the process of negotiation, we're able to appeal to the good conscience of the companies, and we're able to extricate something from them, it will be good.
So the federal government needs to do away with the ultimatums and the threats to file complaints under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act and all of that, and just come to the table and try and negotiate, basically. Because these lapses are systemic and they're recurrent. But it's always difficult. Introspection is always difficult. As an individual or as a nation or as a system, we tend to want to blame other people. But what do you suggest going forward? You mentioned the profit-sharing formula earlier, 80%, 80 to 20, 80% to the IOCs, 20% to Nigeria. What do you suggest going forward for Nigeria? Can we get the Angola model of a 50-50 ratio?
No, anything is possible, subject to negotiations. What the companies, to my own mind, what the companies tend to reject or what they are opposed to is to make it retroactive. Like, for example, you sign a production sharing contract in 1993, and you now want to amend the law. You now say that you want it to take effect from the period for which you signed the first production sharing contract. No companies will agree to that.
In principle, even it's.
Pardon?
In principle, even that's questionable.
Okay, so that is the issue, and that is one of the problems that dogged the PIB in terms of the companies resisting or lobbying that the bill should not be passed in the present state. Otherwise, probably if we have now said that, okay, the new wisdom, forget about the old times. And in life, we tend to lose opportunities. Even as individuals, not to talk about nations, we tend to lose opportunities. So, but we will not die there, just because we lost that opportunity. You have to move on, but then you have to do it speedily. The time we have recognized that we are losing money, and we take initiative and drive it to the logical conclusion, I guess we'll still recover some of the gains. And I hope the present administration will enshrine in a system whereby we don't allow this type of thing to happen. I remember a case in Ghana some few years ago, and I don't know now whether it has been enshrined in the law, but what I read about that time, if my memory serves me right, is that if you make, if by act of omission or commission, you make the state to lose money, you will be sanctioned. You can even go to jail. Is it not about time we start to look at the way we handle our affairs? That people who are making Nigeria to lose revenue, people who are making Nigeria to suffer, and our people are now said to be in a state of poverty beyond any other, most of the countries. Should it be business as usual? Shouldn't we make them to be accountable for their errors of omission or commission?
That's precisely the point.
Yes.
I was drawing.
So that is the issue.
To.
So, but when you look at the way we run our affairs, there are many people who will feel that this is not a this is made up of serious minded people. And at times we tend to portray ourselves as if we are not serious.
Well, quickly, Doctor, we'll soon be rounding up. But before we go, there's a story I saw in the papers. The Minister of State for Petroleum saying that the cost of crude oil production in Nigeria is one of the highest in the world at $30, and that should be reviewed downwards to just about $10. What is this all about?
Well, it's not the President Minister of State, Dr. Kashuku has been saying this. The NNPC, they've been saying this. In fact, I remember Dr. Kashuku was making it as if it was a mantra, for engaging the industry that production costs should be brought down. Well, what are the facts? what are the elements that make up for this?
Unfortunately, Dr. Fawibe will have to go now.
No, but
yes.
yes, let me quickly say it that even the cost of security, maintaining security in the Niger Delta is a high cost element that is tending to put up.
Well, thank you very much.